On 9 nights, 10 days to get the military, key industries and infrastructure and the Taiwanese people themselves prepared for war or disaster. This year's Han Kuang Exercise simulating disruption on every front, not least from China, which has since at least 2022 made near daily incursions both in the air and in the water around Taiwan. We're joined by Kerby Davis. He's a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. He's speaking to us from Notre Dame in the U.S. state of Indiana. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Davis. A reminder, Donald Trump has compared Taiwan to China, comparing Taiwan to the tip of a Sharpie pen and China to the size of a large desk in the room. Now, given this kind of disparity, what can any kind of drills, no matter how innovative, do to aid Taiwan's case?
So the value of these military drills comes from their ability to demonstrate Taiwan's ability to raise the risk for China in the event of any sort of conflict. What's especially valuable about these drills in particular is the involvement of civilian economic factories and these effects on broadband. It helps the whole of Taiwan demonstrate it can be resilient in a crisis. The challenge that Taiwan faces is that it faces multiple threats besides an invasion or blockade or some more traditional scenarios that have been discussed. In recently published research, for example, I've shown that Taiwan could be effectively blockaded not through surface ships, but through missile strikes against its port infrastructure, which, using fewer than 500 missiles, could shut down Taiwan's trade to the tune of 15% of its annual trade. Taiwan needs to show flexibility and be able to respond to multiple types of threats and not just the traditional invasion scenario.
Mr. Davis, you've outlined 3 possible options. So an invasion, that's one for China. A joint firepower strike, this would bomb Taiwan cities and political institutions. And the final one, which you've just mentioned, maritime blockades. But you have also given a much more nuanced reading on the nature of blockades. Blockades can be very different. They are acts of war, and there are ways in which you can fine-tune how you might choose to blockade a country.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways to disrupt trade. The challenge is finding the pathway, at least from China's perspective, that allows it to manage escalation and its own risks. And so Taiwan needs to be thinking about blockades, responses to blockades that raises those risks for China. So a traditional blockade would involve China surrounding the island. And this is actually relatively risky for China, but because it gives Taiwan essentially targets, these naval ships to shoot at. A missile blockade where these port strikes on Taiwan's infrastructure would not present those kinds of risks to China, and so it could actually be more likely.
All right, so when you talk about risk, any country measuring risk from taking any action, China clearly appreciates the risk it might take in even a traditional kind of blockade. So risk in terms of what it costs you, risk in terms of reputation, risk on finance, risk in sustaining any kind of effort. So you are saying that if Taiwan were to choose a cost-effective response, what would you recommend given its resources?
So because Taiwan has so many threats, it needs to be thinking about resiliency over necessarily directly confronting the threat. So for example, the best way to counter missile strikes, one would think, would be missile defense, but missile defense is actually not cost effective. Iran has demonstrated this against the United States, where it's depleted U.S. missile stockpiles on the defense and forced the United States to choose between defending itself or defending its allies. Taiwan can face a scenario where if it relies on missile defense, it would have to choose between defending important civilian infrastructure, defending military infrastructure. It just couldn't defend everything at once without severely depleting its missile stockpile. But if it can prepare itself by demonstrating that it can repair port facilities or can bring in ships that don't rely on port infrastructure, or some of what we've seen in these drills, it can change up how its factories are working. It can show it can outlast the punishment that China would seek to inflict on Taiwan.
And a final question here, we'll return to those drills in Taiwan. So you mentioned raising the risk level for the Chinese calculus on Taiwan. One of the moves this time, moving production of military wear to ensure that they can continue despite wartime conditions. For you, is that a significant move on Taipei's part? Final question.
Yes, this is a very good action on their part. China would prefer a short war. And so being able to move its factory production and keep it essentially alive under Chinese pressure can show that Taiwan can lengthen a war and keep fighting despite whatever China does to it.
Oh, thanks. Kerby Davis, there, postdoctoral fellow at the Belfer Center for Science and Internet Affairs at Harvard University, speaking to us from Notre Dame in Indiana. Thank you.